Hello everyone. Here's another one I've done. Has no name at all. It's only a couple of pages. I've already posted it on the website, but this is my continued effort to record everything that I've done, really. I enjoy doing this, and it's good to have a written record, a spoken record even, of what I've done. So, here we go. Cup of tea, Reverend? No, thank you, Gladys. I think I've had enough tea for today, Reverend Evans replied, waving the frail lady away. Poor dear, he thought. She often offered him the same cup of tea 5 times throughout the fellowship until he finally gave in and took the cold cup from her trembling hands. He never liked these fellowships after the sermons. Once he'd gone over the message of the service with the older members of the congregation who either couldn't hear, see, or understand him, he was bombarded with cups of tea by Gladys, the news of the next book sale in the village by the ever-infuriating parish councillor Dave, and of course Joyce with her rosy cheeks and bracelet-covered arms. Speak of the devil, Reverend Evans muttered, turning away in an attempt to hide from the spherical shape of joy across the church. Too late. Reverend, came the grating sing-song voice through a crowd of the congregation. Oh, Reverend! Gritting his teeth, the Reverend turned on his heels and beamed at the squat Joyce. Mrs. Davenport, Reverend Evans said. What a wonderful sight. I hope you enjoyed the sermon. Very informative, Reverend. I love the fact that the subject was compassion, Mrs. Davenport. It was about compassion, he replied. His sermons really needed to be clearer. A large part of his congregation seemed to have trouble grasping these concepts, probably because they consisted almost entirely of half-deaf 80-year-olds. Anyway, Reverend, I have a nice surprise for you, she beamed. He's a lovely young fellow, a bit shy. She dragged a man out of the crowd behind her. And what a sight he was! At least 7 foot, a slick of black hair that flopped dreamily across his perfect forehead. He gave a sheepish grin with his chiselled jaw before crossing his gigantic muscular arms. Reverend, meet a new member of our congregation, Kent Clark. Nice to meet you, Kent. He held his hand out and Kent took it rather uncertainly, shaking his hand slowly. The Reverend searched through his mind for the familiar image of... Sorry there, Kent, but... Do I know you? The Reverend asked, looking at him closely. Joyce gasped. You already know each other? This is just fabulous. Kent's just moved here from the big city. He said he's looking for somewhere a little quieter to settle down. Yes, Reverend Evans said, not really listening. Only it's just I think I might have seen you in a comic book or somewhere. Kent Clark looked uncomfortable, looking around the church. Joyce tittered annoyingly, patting the Reverend on his black cloaked arm. Oh, Reverend, you are a funny one. Don't worry, Kent, he's always pulling jokes like this. But really, you should come to some of the weekly meetings in the parish. We have a fabulous book club every fortnight on Wednesdays. Joyce started leading Kent away, and the Reverend breathed a sigh of relief, turning to the rest of the chatting pension-age congregation. Was he the only one who thought that Kent looked suspiciously like a Superman of some sort? Surely he wasn't the only one who read comic books when he was younger. He walked up to the front of the church, away from the congregation, past the rows of wooden pews. Standing at the lectern, collecting his notes, he suddenly heard a shout from the hordes of tea drinkers by the front double doors. Gladys! Oh dear, she's scalded herself with a tea urn! Quick, someone get a towel! As the pensioners panicked around the tea trolley, the church shook and a voice boomed out. This looks like a job for... Suddenly, Kent Clark bounded out from the vestry, dressed head to toe in primary colours. He leapt over the pensioners with a great whoosh, grabbed a tea towel and started dabbing at Gladys's wool jumper. It all happened in a matter of seconds. The Reverend had barely noticed what had occurred. Goodness, Kent, you're a lifesaver, a woman said, standing over Kent as he wiped the steaming tea off Gladys's clothes. What would we have done without you? You'll certainly have to join us at the coffee mornings on Monday, Joyce remarked. Your treatment of Gladys will be the talk of the village. Are you kidding me? Reverend Evans shouted, stalking down the church aisle towards the crowd. They turned to watch as he stormed up to Kent. Can't any of you see? He continued. He's Superman. He certainly is a Superman. Look at the clean-up he did on Gladys's clothes. But he's not Kent Clark. He's Clark Kent. Haven't you read the stories, the comics? What about the films? Kent/Clark stared at him as he stood up, putting the tea towel on the table beside him. Don't be silly, Reverend, Joyce said. He's a helpful young man, not some sort of fictional character. Good grief, Joyce, are you blind? He's got a giant S on his shirt. He's dressed inside out. Look at his red underpants. Reverend, please, Kent's only trying to help. It's Clark. Please, Superman, just tell them. It's hard enough getting this lot to understand my sermons, let alone the fact that you're a superhero. Kent/Clark looked uncomfortable, covering up the gigantic S emblazoned upon his chest. I'm sorry, he said to the Reverend, smoothing his jet black hair. This escape to the country is clearly not worked out. He walked silently past the crowd, past the shocked Reverend and out of the double doors of the church entrance. As he disappeared beyond the gates of the graveyard, the congregation heard a whoosh of wind and a flash of blue and red flying up into the sky. There we go. Another one done.